From the beginning, I had hated school, or maybe just the other kids. Even in first grade, I sat alone on the playground and drew comics. In second grade, I misspelled the word neighbor in front of the class and they all laughed. It was the first mistake I had made. During recess, another student framed me by making me hold my tongue and say, "apple," to the teacher. I sat by myself during recess and drew elaborate torture dungeons with an assembly line treadmill, running through acid rooms, and fire rooms, and armies of massive tanks covered in bazookas in spikes. In the 4th and 5th grade, I made a series of games, Smiley's Adventure 1 to 6, in Hyperstudio instead of doing homework. I hid in the library during recess and played a portable magnetic chessboard against myself. One of the teachers found me and grabbed the board, sending the pieces flying under the library shelves. I ran home crying. In the 6th grade, I used some simple workaround to get into the admin control panel and change the network password. They had the DARE officer come get me out of class and change it back. At the time, I wondered how they knew it was me. Around that time, I rode my bike to the recycling center down the street and found a paper grocery bag full of old Penthouse porn magazines in the newspaper section, and hid them in the woods. I took one back and hid it under my mattress, because it was a stereotype that the television had told me was a normal thing to do. I can't remember what happened to it. I think my mom probably found it and took it away, and I just pretended it didn't happen. From that day on, everything felt a little off. My parents didn't feel like my real parents. I'm not exactly sure where things went wrong. I had a great childhood, and my parents were amazing. I went on ski trips, camping with Boy Scouts, and a cruise to the Bahamas. I even went to space camp. I remember being in my next-door neighbor's basement and finding a single of 9-inch nails, closer, left there by one of his older siblings. I picked it up and was mesmerized by the cover, immediately wanting to listen to it. Perhaps that's when the devil got in. It's difficult to know. It wasn't Trent Reznor's fault. I think he got it from David Bowie, who got it from. I had always been insecure. I wet the bed until about age 8, I think, a major sign of psychopathy. I have an uneven jawline and a crooked smile. When I was younger it was more pronounced and I looked really gimpy. One of my earliest memories is of my mom bringing me into the bathroom and telling me that I was different than the other kids. I hadn't known. I think part of me must have blamed her. From that moment on, I was the smartest. I tried the hardest. I refused to talk to any of the other kids. When I was young, I searched through all my parents' things, looking for any weakness I could find, any reason to not respect him, to not have to listen to the strict rules. I couldn't find anything. I was disappointed that my dad didn't have any porn like some of my friends' dads. I kept searching the house, the attic, the basement. He had to have some. The TV said so. There was something magical about those pictures. They were almost sparkling. They got in my brain and did something weird to it. It created a war between me and my parents. It gave me attention problems. It infected my brain and stole years from my childhood. It made me dream of riches and power. It distracted me from my schoolwork and from doing the things I love to do. It created a rift between me and my mother, a woman who I now resented for getting between me and sex. I had been an altar boy at the local mega church, and one day while bored sitting in Mass, I read Revelations in the Bible and looked around in awe, astounded that all of these adults actually believed this nonsense about beasts with 60,000 horns. Nobody bothered to explain to me that as we get older, we start tripping our balls off, and it is describing the imagination of the subconscious. After church one day, my mom tried to get me to memorize a Lutheran catechism. I could tell that they were programming my brain somehow. and I despised it so much that I threw a huge tantrum, throwing the book across the room, repeatedly smashing my face into my mattress, and grabbing a red metal coin bank and scratching "hate" into the back of it. I think this was probably the beginning of my fall from grace. I refused to let my mom into my heart. The master sorcerer Steve Jobs came into our home around this point, his power glowing from the tiny CRT monitor on a Mac Performer 630. It had 8 megabytes of RAM and a 33 MHz processor. My brother showed me how to use Z-Term to dial into a local BBS. From that moment, I was hooked. Stereotypically, I racked up a $1,000 phone bill calling long-distance BBSs. I downloaded the Anarchist Cookbook from somewhere and printed it out, taking it to school and showing it to another kid, not knowing any better. It's a miracle I wasn't expelled. I played Legend of the Red Dragon each day after school, and after my BBS time ran out, played Warcraft 2, Marathon, Dark Forces, Doom 2, and went through one of those 1,000 shareware games CDs looking for anything fun. At some point, I begged my parents for a Mac game programming book, and they bought it for me after I assured them I would learn from it. It was expensive and heavy. I didn't understand any of it, and got frustrated after only a few days of trying to make sense of the quick draw code. I shamefully put it on the bookshelf, never to be opened again. We got a Super Nintendo. I played Super Mario World over and over, getting to the Star World. We got a Super Scope and I played Battle Clash and Metal Combat. Me and my next-door neighbor would sit in the basement and play Legend of the Mystical Ninja for hours. Using Game Genie, I played Zelda for SNES when homesick from school, but I never beat it. I tried every single fatality in Mortal Kombat 2. I was obsessed with my brother's collection of Nintendo Power and EGM. We got an N64. I spent a summer vacation in the basement eating giant bowls of black cherry ice cream and getting 120 stars in Mario 64 over and over. It always felt strange and lonely when I finally got onto the castle roof, so I would start over again. My brother was usually in his room playing Final Fantasy III and Secret of Mana on the Super NES, the haunting melodies constantly audible outside his door. I got almost all the gold medals in Blast Corps. I spent middle school playing Marathon 2, Deathmatch against my science and social studies teachers and playing with a Tetris keychain. My science teacher ended up getting reprimanded for it, but it helped me cope with school. In the 8th grade, the gifted kids had been set aside and given a list of classes they would be taking in high school. In a program called MST, Math, Science, Tech, I leaned over to my friend, pointed to the C++ class, and said, "I'm taking that. And then I'm out of here." I didn't really think I had the balls to go through with it, but that's exactly what I ended up doing. A year later, in high school, the genius kids took the short bus to the gifted center. None of us really realizing that we were abnormal. I liked the Pascal, and later C++ teacher, Mr. Konrad Dzwonkiewicz. I really only ever had liked a few teachers, and he had the patience to put up with me the most. He told me I was like Steve Jobs in 9th grade. My final Pascal project was an DOS graphics mode adventure game that had a player sprite follow their mouse cursor. Mr. Dzwonkiewicz came and asked if I had really made it, surprised since I had never turned in any homework. I had made it in a single night on an insanely slow DOS emulator running Turbo Pascal on my Mac at home. I begged my mom to order me a CD64 from China. She didn't know what it was. Of course, it arrived, and I stared at the N64 expansion port, wondering how it was possible anyone could figure such a thing out. Surely they must be aliens. I spent days wiggling the cheap connectors trying to get it to boot up. Once in a while it actually worked, and I played as many N64 games as I could. Finally having the chance to see imported and rare games most of the time. However, I played F-Zero X. Amazed by the smooth 60 FPS movement, a girl approached me in high school with a note asking me out. At last, my chance had arrived to get laid, just like I had read and heard. I thought it was a normal thing to do, but some part of me knew it was wrong. My morals had been corrupted. Her father had a heavy drinking problem, and she was attracted to my problems. It's strange how these things work out. We're just puppets on a big automatic chessboard. All the world's a stage. My brother bought me the first porn CD and I listened to it on my COS CD player. I got obsessed with the band and drew the logo on my backpack. I didn't quite understand the lyrics, or what crystal meth was, but it sounded cool. For some reason I started getting more emotionally unstable and aggressive. In the 10th grade, the great wizard Bill Gates infiltrated his way into our family. I had convinced my parents to buy me a Windows laptop, promising that it would help with my homework. I dialed into NetZero and used a program to block the pop-up ad window every 10 minutes. I spent my time on ICQ, IRC, and read horrible websites like Something Awful and Style Project. I played Quake 2 and Thief and Carmageddon. I listened to The Fragile by Nine Inch Nails, a young warlock named Trent Reznor, which my mom had bought me, and I blasted it out my bedroom window, making my dad angry. "He's just taking advantage of your emotions," he said to me. He was right. It was awesome. Thanks, Mom. I read 2600 magazine and ate up all the internet rhetoric written by anarchists and libertarian conspiracy theorists living in trailers. No doubt. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't need college. It was a waste of my time. I should become an entrepreneur, to be honest. I doubt I would have gotten much out of school anyhow. I didn't have the self-control or discipline to get much from the actual knowledge. Due to the porn habit, and now especially the girl, it was the dot-com boom and I signed up for everything I could. There was a whole world to conquer on the little screen in my bedroom, and I was desperate to be an adult and get a piece of the action. I applied for credit cards until I somehow got one, accidentally, putting in the wrong birth date. My credit is still a disaster because of this. I got a Netflix account and rented a terrible DVD of ladies playing nude football which I never returned. I got a Diamond Rio MP3 player and was automatically signed up for a monthly Audible subscription. I got a Quackert. I got free groceries, free trials, and free samples. I somehow got 8 cases of Dr. Pepper shipped to our door just for clicking and typing. My parents' mailbox quickly filled up with scummy MLM and pyramid scheme advertisements under their fake names I had used. They didn't say a thing. Thanks, Dad, but they did sit me down at the dinner table and ask why I had signed up for a free email address. solson@punkass.net. Punkass isn't something you want to call yourself, my dad said. Of course, I didn't understand. I had chosen the name from a Korn CD album art and misspelled it, around grade 11. While taking the C++ class, I figured out various ways around the protection software they had installed and got suspended for installing Command & Conquer Red Alert on the network. I played 16-player Quake back at the normal high school with some older wild computer kids who talked about MDMA and Burning Man and FreeBSD. I of course couldn't realize it yet. But we were the criminals, the antisocial students, the insecure ones. I tried to build some desktop computers for my relatives to make some extra money. I bought the cheapest parts from Pricewatch.com and went to the local Gibraltar Trading Center computer show. buying a couple of terrible Cyrix CPUs. The computers barely worked and were very unstable, but they booted. And it wasn't my problem. I felt awful at my failure but pushed it out of my mind. My girlfriend and I became sexually active, afraid to get her pregnant. And with no condoms, we had anal sex. She pretended not to mind and didn't say anything, because she had seen her dad's porno channel. Our parents found our dirty emails and colluded. And my mom tried to control me by humiliating me, making me wear pink shirts to school and getting me a job putting shoes on old ladies at Crowley's in the mall. She bought me a shirt that said "bugger" on it and had me wear it to school. My chemistry teacher stopped me and asked me if I knew what it meant. It was subconscious mind control, deception, and it shoved me into a haze, but I fought back instinctively. My girlfriend's father started drinking again after trying to chase me out of the house. A few months later, he went on a really hard bender and died from alcohol poisoning. Her father ended up dying because of me. I caused her great damage and I regret that most of all. I didn't want to believe it, but part of me knew I wasn't innocent at the time. We both justified it. It was his fault, he was weak, etc. But I wasn't blameless. After all, I was just as weak. I started going insane. Deep down, I thought of myself as secretly evil. A few months later, I coldly and cruelly dumped her, unable to deal with the guilt. Immediately after, probably due to the pink shirts and humiliating jobs, I went online and for some reason tried to get fucked by a guy. I went over some guy's house and sucked his dick for about 2 seconds. Then ran out and drove back home shaking. My mom had publicly subconsciously humiliated me in front of my peers. But since I had no choice but to continue to rely and trust my parents, it shoved me into mental confusion. I had been manipulated into a double bind where I lost all my self-respect and self-worth, and was driven into self-humiliation. This is the foundation for taming humans. It frustrates us into submission. To restore my self-respect, I had to either cut off the relationship and slam the door on my parents, start a war, or withstand the frustration and make myself much stronger. I instinctively chose the former. Not understanding that there was another choice, I gave up trying in school. Frustrated, addicted, unable to focus, I became more and more impulsive and self-destructive, and started skipping classes. I started making as much trouble as I could, seeing how far I could stretch the rules. I started wearing all black and listening to Nine Inch Nails, Underworld, Marilyn Manson, and KMFDM on my Diamond Rio. I become obsessed with The Matrix and watched the scene where they storm into the building over and over on a pirated VCD rip that had taken several days to download. I started playing paintball, thinking I was tough for coming home with welts all over my back. Columbine happened and the shooters were like heroes to me in my insecure and angry state. There is something fascinating and morbidly cool about Columbine. But it is absolutely not cool that it actually happened. It is terrifying and incredibly tragic. I had no measure to understand the pain it had caused. I used the opportunity to play up the black clothing, and almost got expelled for making a mock hit list full of fake names. It worked in a way. Everyone started leaving me alone. My friends banded together and cut off their friendship with me. I felt betrayed and reacted by conquering the school, with me or against me. I was a warmonger, forcing a divide. I hid in the principal's administration bathroom while skipping classes, playing Worms Armageddon and Quake 2 on my laptop. I threw stuff out of the bus window at passing cars. I nabbed a fetal pig from the biology lab and stuffed it in my locker. I still think this is a bit funny, though disturbing. I was self-destructing and I didn't care. I became emotionally unstable and decided I didn't want to live. and I ordered some potassium cyanide from a research chemical site. My dad intercepted the package, covered with orange warning stickers. He was clearly angry, but he didn't say anything. Walking home from school, I stole a traffic statistics device from the side of the road, and the police, who had seen me from down the street, rolled up to our driveway at the very moment my dad was pulling in. I could not have been more frustrating, but my dad bore it all with great patience. Digital cameras were just coming out, and I walked into Montgomery Ward's and ripped one off the display shelf, walking out with it as the alarm went off. I stole an HTML for Dummies book from the library I had loved as a child. I got caught shoplifting awful hentai videos, Lovely Girl, from FYE in the mall. That store is demonic and they deserved it, and had to attend a shrinkage prevention class. My parents started taking me to a psychologist, who agreed with me that it was my parents' fault for punishing me for things I couldn't help doing. It didn't matter, because my parents couldn't help reacting to my behavior any more than I could help doing it, and it was my fault to begin with. I was surrounded with evil that I didn't have the wisdom or strength to resist, and surrounded with all the justification I needed to accept that it was normal. We're taught to be helpless victims. I should have went jogging, lifted weights, done something, but I didn't know. I didn't understand. Physical willpower is directly connected to mental willpower. Physical fitness is just as or more important than intelligence. But I was a genius and I knew it. Geniuses take over the world with the mind. They don't lift weights. In school, I was approached by a new girl. Her mother had put her on birth control, a wise decision, to her father's dismay. She had discovered the power of lust with her first boyfriend and was all too willing to let me do whatever I wanted. Suddenly I couldn't handle the prison of school, my parents' house. Naturally, I didn't care how I got out. Instinctively, to spite my mom, I printed out a giant poster of the girl's picture I had taken with the digital camera I had stolen from Montgomery Ward's and hung it on my bedroom wall. 11th grade ended, and it was summer vacation. Somehow, I got involved with another kid from my school, whose parents were going through a divorce, without a solid home to keep him under control, and angry at his father. He got into computers, shaved his head, and became obsessed with first-person shooters and tactical military gear. I had found a partner in crime, and we chatted online and researched stun guns together. I rented a bunch of cult movies and horror films from the corner video store, Taxi Driver, Pulp Fiction, and the like. I got into Howard Stern and George Carlin. I started listening to angrier music, Eminem and ICP. The criminals had gotten in and were quickly making me into one of them, stealing away any morals I had left and making me into a psychopath. I made an awful blog called I8.net, and tried to get my brother's friends involved, but with nothing interesting to say. I just posted pictures of Asian porno on it. My mom got angry and took away my laptop and kicked me in an angry fit. I was incredibly manipulative and used it as emotional leverage. I had every right to be furious. Why? She had ruined my business. It was abuse. I had to stand up for myself. I used the credit card to buy a jelly vagina masturbator. My girlfriend introduced me to one of her friends, a guy with a face piercing who smoked clove cigarettes and had his own apartment. I went over his apartment and downloaded KMFDM MP3s from Napster on his Comcast cable modem. Realizing I could escape, I started researching apartments online, desperate to find a way out. Desperate to have a place to have sex with my girlfriend, I decided to quit school. And then I decided that I was going to prove that religion was nonsense. I didn't know why, but something about it just bothered me. I had seen the truth of reality. Why? It was all gore and porn. Morality was overrated, and these people were all getting suckered. Knowing I was not a legal adult, I snuck out at night with my friend and slipped into a few local churches just to prove that nothing would happen. I was angry, for some reason, that the church was taking people's money. If anything, I thought it should be used to help me. I didn't get caught, but it was in the newspaper, and I think there were even some copycats. I didn't do much damage, but the damage was done to me. I had just turned 17 years old. My girlfriend was going on a trip somewhere and she wanted a ride home. My dad refused to let me drive her, because it was an opportunity for us to have sex, and he was trying to save my soul. My conniving mind claimed innocence, as it was only a ride home, and we got into a fight. I had a chip on my shoulder and was instinctively pushing my parents' buttons, trying to manipulate them into getting angry so I had a reason to leave. Of course, I had no idea I was doing this. It was all automatic. It worked. I had frustrated my dad. He grabbed my neck and yelled at me, and I immediately ran to the phone and called the police, telling him he had strangled me. The police came, looked at my unblemished neck, chuckled, and left. My dad told me to get out of this house, and I yelled back, "I will." I was powerless. He was a lot bigger than me, and I only reacted naturally, but it was my fault. I was actually innocent in a way. It was because of the sins of those before me, the sins of the criminals and pornographers and the media that justified it, but at every junction, I had a choice. It was my fault for letting him. That's the paradox of personal responsibility. We are in a predatory world, completely surrounded by mind control designed to steal our souls, or sap away our self-control, morality, and sense of self. But there is no way for us to truly know this until we're victimized by it, and yet it's our fault for not knowing. Listen to your parents is about all the advice we get, without an explanation of why, fueled by lust and desperation. I printed a terrible fake ID on a Lexmark printer in my bedroom. It went out and walked into every apartment complex I could find, filling out applications and bullshitting my way through the process, telling them I was a website programmer. I finally got approved for one. I don't even think they looked at the ID before photocopying it in, handing it back. Unfortunately, the only thing I could get was a townhouse way more expensive than I could afford. I paid the deposit with money we had stolen from the church. I slipped out of my parents' house at night, taking a garbage bag full of clothes and hastily writing a note informing my parents that they had heads like a hole, and that I would rather die than give them control. Me and my friend moved into the empty townhouse. There was a cheap rubber ball from Walmart and a unicycle in the middle of the downstairs floor for weeks and nothing else. The principal of my school called my prepaid cell phone one of the first nights I moved in and asked me to come back to school. I refused, my mind shimmering with cognitive dissonance. I maxed out a credit card, buying a blow-up bondage bed and some sex toys. I was completely free. For the first time, I was a wild man. I knew it wouldn't last, but I didn't care. There was no more pressure on my heart, and I suddenly felt like I could do anything. I was an animal and a monster. I spanked my girlfriend until she had bruises and welts, then took pictures of it with the stolen digital camera, claiming my territory. She cheated on me with one of my rivals from high school and then dumped me, stabbing me in the heart with disrespect. I was furious and thrown into a rage at the betrayal. And after days of pacing and losing my mind, I started smoking cigarettes at my neighbor's advice. It was definitely not good advice. It worked, but it only repressed the emotional pain, which I would eventually have to deal with, only exponentially worse. We walked around at night and climbed on top of buildings. Once, we pushed over an air conditioner unit on top of a building, cut a hole in the insulation underneath, and rappelled down into it. Having successfully pulled off the Hollywood stunt, we climbed out and left, leaving no trace. They were real crimes. But we weren't real criminals, we were two suburb kids pretending to be tough. We needed money, however, and neither of us had any ideas, nor the balls to commit any serious heists. I came up with an idea for a few quasi-legal online schemes, and tried to create a fake address to pull one of them off by installing a new mailbox next to some existing ones and tacking on a B address. It didn't work. The property owner just removed it. I came up with a somewhat good idea for relisting badly written eBay auctions, buying the original, in keeping the price difference. But it was even more tedious than a real job. I quickly learned there was no way to get rich quick, even if I had total freedom. The freedom was attractive, and several of my high school peers came and visited. It was strange how distant they seemed. I was in a whole different world. I was proud of myself and had great confidence, though I was repressing terrible fear and shame. I invited over a few girls from high school on AOL Instant Messenger, and awkwardly slept with two of them and made out with two others. There was one girl I knew from my church youth group on my AIM list that I had had a big crush on when I was much younger, and for some reason, chatting with her made me feel really bad. I got briefly involved with a pregnant girl and slept with her twice. Once walking to her apartment complex in the middle of the night, I found a Game Boy Color with Pokémon Blue in it sitting outside somewhere in her apartment complex, and picked it up. Later, I felt very guilty I had taken it, realizing she was in low-income housing, and it was some poor kids. I played Pokémon Blue on it and got obsessed. I got a big poster and memorized all the Pokémon. My roommate got picked up by his mother after a month or two. I drove over his father's house and angrily demanded rent payment, but he said he was broke. It was probably a bluff, but it worked and I didn't put up a fight. I never saw my friend again. I applied for more credit cards, thinking I could juggle the balances to pay my rent. It didn't work. I just wasn't responsible enough to pull it off, and I maxed them all out within a month or two. The police probably knew or suspected that I was up to no good, and several times there were police cars strangely parked in front of my apartment, probably just to send a subconscious message and strike some fear into me. I didn't realize it at the time, of course, but it worked. I stopped committing crimes and got into drugs instead. I tried smoking weed for the first time at my neighbor's house. I was hesitant at first, but I figured I had already destroyed my life, so how much worse could it get? We watched the Pokémon movie and giggled the whole time. I remember everything sparkling and feeling very floaty. And after the first time, all my apprehension about it was gone. It tends to have that effect, which is why it quickly becomes a habit. It made me less aggressive, but also confused and more afraid of what I had gotten myself into. It became an escape from what I had done, giving me back an illusion of the childhood I had just abandoned. For a few months I worked at a small dot-com bubble startup with my friends Phil and Steve, making a scammy health food website called Dr. Health. I told the guy we should ditch that site and make a social hub website called Popple, where you could see what your friends were up to. Basically Friendster or an early MySpace. In 2002, I had drawn up a bunch of papers and insisted it was a good idea. He didn't like the idea. After he ran out of funding, I eventually sold him my laptop to pay my rent. 2 years passed. Somehow, I got some new roommates. My apartment was soon full of local runaways, kids with tattoos and piercings who smoked cigarettes and weed, who I had no idea how I had gotten involved with. I got drunk and smoked pot at my neighbor's, playing Super Smash Bros. On N64 for months. I always played as Samus and I always won. We watched Dragon Ball Z and I bleached my hair and put glue in it to make myself Super Saiyan. I went to a few raves took Pikachu, ecstasy. I tried ketamine, cocaine, and opium once each with some of my roommate's friends, thinking it was the chance of a lifetime to find something so rare. It was stupid, they are everywhere, and none of them are very good. I cut a hole in the wall and tapped into the neighbor's phone line, dialing into Net Zero in the middle of the night. I started listening to weird synth-pop music app Optic Neighbor Zircon VNV Nation that I had downloaded from Audio Galaxy. For some reason, as soon as I heard it, I immediately knew it was the kind of music I liked. It wasn't aggressive and angry like the music I had listened to before. It was just weird and made me feel like an alien. I got a kitten, named it Mew, and accidentally killed it the first night I had it. I was stoned, and it woke me up somehow. I got angry and put it in a big plastic bucket in the closet, half asleep and confused. In the morning, it was dead, it had suffocated. I panicked and told my roommate I had stepped on it. I felt absolutely horrible about it and pushed it out of my mind, trying to forget what a monster I was. It shoved me further into a haze. I had somehow found a way each month to scrape together the rent, but I was fighting a losing battle and I knew it. After a year or two of odd jobs and various schemes, one of my roommates got me a job working at the Walmart across the street. My apartment was at the top of a long hill, and each morning I imagined flying down the hill with one giant jump. I worked out some rough estimates and decided it would take about 30 garbage bags full of helium to be nearly buoyant. I have no idea if this is correct, but I'd still like to figure it out. I wish I would have tried it, though I most likely would have gotten hurt. I played Zelda Ocarina of Time on an emulator on my lunch break. It was November 2002. I was 19 years old. I worked in the Walmart Tire and Lube Express, changing oil on old Chevy Astro vans with leaky, rusted-out oil plugs. I stayed in the underground oil change pit all day wearing a dark blue jumpsuit and scribbled startup ideas for a Napster killer and a Phoenix, later named Firefox, bookmark sync plug-in, amongst many others, on oil-stained napkins. Notice I called my sync plug-in Firebar. I wouldn't realize until much later that I was clairvoyant. Clear vision. I decided one Saturday night to go with some friends to an industrial dance club in Detroit called Leland City Club. Of course, I stayed out way too late and was too tired to make it into work, so I called in. I didn't have a good excuse, so I told my manager that I had been out dancing, and then added that I had sprained my ankle. The next day I got an ace bandage and some blue ink and faked a sprained ankle. Even though nobody would have cared to look, I wasn't good at lying. A few days later I stopped going in, probably out of embarrassment. City Club. My electricity had just gotten shut off. I realized the power company guy had simply rotated the electric meter to an off position, and fastened it with a piece of thin wire. I cranked it back, and the lights turned on. I was sure I was going to be dead soon, so I didn't consider the consequences. I hid in my bedroom and sat on my Walmart futon with a cheetah print comforter and played through Super Metroid on an emulator on my patchwork PC cobbled together from salvaged parts, with the first and only bag of weed I had ever purchased sitting on the table next to me. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just sort of assumed that my life would end, as if my power would shut off as soon as I ran completely out of money. I had all but given up and was waiting for the end. The police came into my apartment the night I was stoned and playing Super Metroid. Apparently someone had broken into a Subway across the street, and they were looking for a stolen safe. They came into my bedroom, checked the closet, and told me they didn't care about my weed. I beat Super Metroid, alone in a giant puzzle world. It was the greatest experience I had ever had. It was also, by that point, pretty much all I had. My neighbor got me a job as a janitor at the Great Indoors for a week. I snorted crushed up Ritalin out of a pen in the bathroom that my roommate had gotten from his little brother. I stopped going in, and my roommate moved out with his girlfriend. I was alone. A miracle happened, and another, I just couldn't see it. I don't know how. But an old friend from high school met up with me, telling me there was a new arcade game I'd like at his work, Dave & Buster's. I went to Dave & Buster's with him and played Pump It Up, which started my obsession for dance games. Within weeks I was playing Burn Dance Revolution CDs on a borrowed PlayStation using a Pro Action Replay on a soft DDR pad I had ordered from Lixang. I wondered what kind of insane Japanese person could possibly read the Maniac Steps again. Somehow, another guy the first went to high school with came over. He brought over a NES and Super Mario Bros. 3 and we played through it overnight. We went to City Club together. He gave me a 54 milligrams Concerta and said, "Don't let this be the end of Bob Poloni." I held onto it and remembered those words. He got me a job with him at Joang Fabrics working temp shelf construction. I went to the interview stoned and got the job anyway. For 2 weeks I rode there on my bike and listened to VNV Nation on my Diamond Rio. I'm not alone. I'm not afraid. I'm not unhappy. I met a red-haired lady there who also went to City Club, who moved into my apartment with her boyfriend a few weeks later. The couple was sleeping on a queen-sized bed on the lower floor of my apartment. A few nights later, the red-haired lady sorta seduced me and I slept with her once. She had indoctrinated me into a new family. My parents came to visit my apartment for the first time, perhaps sensing this, and the couple answered the door. One day I was in Target with my roommate, and the power went out. The store went totally dark. I was in the video game section, and I took the opportunity to grab an original pink translucent GBA, the kind without a backlight that was nearly unplayable inside. I took it as some sort of sign and walked out with it, holding the box in my hand. A week or two later, there was an eviction notice on my door. I laughed in despair and threw a hammer through the wall. We went to City Club. Miraculously, the couple decided to get another apartment in the same apartment complex and they offered to let me live there. I was there for a few days and bought a GameCube with Super Mario Sunshine, and played it ferociously on an old blurry CRT TV that cut off half the text and life meter. A local arcade got Dance Revolution Max 2 and I got good. I played Stepmania on my PC with my fingers. I beat Max Unlimited on Maniac in the arcade. DDR Extreme came out and I beat The Legend of Max. It was saving my life and ruining my life at the same time. I didn't know what was happening, but I was becoming a dance god and Dance Revolution was taking me to heaven. I was truly proud of a skill that I had for the first time, and it gave me self-esteem at a time when I had none. It was November 2002, Metroid Fusion was leaked online and I played through it in a single night in Visual Boy Advance. I bought Metroid Prime a few days later and played it in the dark over the next few nights. A few days later, a girl came to visit, a friend of the couple. I thought that she was maybe the hottest girl I had ever seen. She sat on the couch next to me that night as I was playing Super Monkey Ball on the blurry TV, and a few hours later was sleeping in my futon. Suddenly, I had a girlfriend, and a hot, smart one at that. At once I had the motivation to do something with my life, and I was certain what I was destined to do. I knew I couldn't make a GameCube game or a PC game like Quake, but I could probably make something pretty good for the Game Boy Advance. It made sense at the time. It was 2003. I forgot everything that happened. My mind repressed it all and replaced it with a permanent veil of innocence. I was a new person with a new identity. God had answered my prayers and sent me an angel. And I was going to make it right. I had a chance to start over. I downloaded an open-source development kit for the GBA and got a dot moving on the screen of an emulator. This was the first serious program I had ever written. Super Metroid had somehow pulled me out of a hopeless disaster and brought me opportunity. I knew this was what I was going to do with my life. I just didn't yet know the difference between an open-source homebrew toolchain and a commercial development kit. Everyone has to start somewhere. I had taken that C++ class in high school before dropping out, and had the confidence that it was enough. I knew I was smart, that I was really smart. And I was desperate. I had to figure out how to keep this girl. I had to do something. One night when she couldn't come over, I ate the 54 milligrams Concerta that my friend left at my old place and covered my bedroom floor with scribbled papers, dissecting Super Metroid movement animations frame by frame and making measurements to try and reverse engineer the physics. In one night, I had a ripped Samus sprite jumping on the screen with animation. I had convinced myself that I could make a game. I copied the code to a new directory, and started working on a simple game, like Zelda, but with guns and drugs like GTA, called Zeldrug. It probably would have sold well. I got on AOL Instant Messenger and messaged my friend Phil, asking him to start a video game company with me. My enthusiasm and determination convinced him and he got on board. We called the company PNB Soft until we thought of something better, suddenly empowered by their new relationship. I had confidence and pride, and it was time to create my criminal empire. I walked to my parents' house in the snow, listening to weird synth-pop on my Diamond Rio. And once there, realizing they weren't home, I got angry and kicked in the garage door. I took a box of coins, a few dollars, and a Palm Pilot. I sold the coins for a carton of cigarettes on the way back home. A few weeks later, I showed up at my parents' house again, stormed in, and announced that I was an evil person all along, and asked him if they would help me make a business. I knew if I had the resources I could be successful. Miraculously, my dad agreed to help me. I tried not to look at the broken garage door. They didn't say anything, and I gradually forgot about it completely. I moved out of the couple's apartment with my girlfriend in a dramatic gesture. The red-haired lady was upset that her new family was broken, and I coldly cut her off. Without really realizing what I was doing, I had started my own family. I was a man. My girlfriend and I got an apartment in a very cheap, shoddy apartment complex. There was black mold running up one of the walls, and the apartment across the hall's ceiling caved in because of a water leak, but we didn't care. I started borrowing money from my parents after showing them some demos. My dad agreed to give me about $500 a month to pay rent. They were undoubtedly worried about my apparent madness and refusal to deal with reality. And perhaps my dad saw a bit of himself in my ambition. I printed out long articles from Gamer Sutra about game development and the game industry, hole-punched him, and put him in binders. I learned about being a lone wolf, and about postmortems and how to deal with publisher negotiations. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but I was sure I could figure it out. I am pretty sure now that those people didn't know what they were doing either. I convinced Phil that we only had to make a tech demo and we could convince publishers to give us funding. I had no idea what I was talking about, but a few plastic binders with economy printed hole-punched articles was all I had to believe in. My Don Quixote journey had begun. The Game Boy Advance SP came out and we each got one for testing purposes. Of course, I ordered a couple of GBA flashcards from Lan Kuei. We used the Ham high-level GBA library along with Div Key Tarm, which was buggy and not quite finished but usable enough. This project was the one thing I had going for me, and I stubbornly held on long after we started to run into problems. Phil came over and we had a brainstorm session. I came up with what I thought was the greatest game idea ever. An adventure RPG set in a modern suburb where you fight in mini-game battles instead of typical RPG battles. Phil liked the idea and RPG with mini-games stayed on the whiteboard from that moment on. After some time, we called it Button Mash. We decided to rename the company to Monkeys on Keyboards. Each day, Phil drove up with some hot and now cheeseburgers for us and hacked on a Marble Madness clone in one of the bedrooms with me. I was probably the worst person in the world to work with, and Phil was a champion for putting up with me as long as he did. I sat there chain-smoking with a fan in the window, at his request, playing obnoxious techno music, trying to force myself to pretend I knew what I was doing enough to make a Tetris clone. At night I played pirated GBA games on my flash cart. During the day I browsed through lots of Super Nintendo ROMs on ZSNES with a Lixang PSX controller adapter on my cobbled-together PC running pirated Windows XP. Phil kept his legit Windows box on the desk like a trophy. I had no such integrity, yet Phil was a far better programmer than I was. Starting in high school and having gone to Michigan Tech for the past few years, and I struggled to keep up. It's incredible that he stuck around as long as he did. I somehow finished the Tetris clone in a week or two and began working on a clone of Puyo Puyo. Phil finished his Marble Madness clone and made Checkers, a slide puzzle, and then a Cameltry clone, amongst a few others. I started working on a DDR clone. I covered the windows with black plastic. We lived in a cave and it was paradise. My girlfriend played Earthbound on a PC emulator and Zelda Wind Waker for GameCube on the couch. I got through extra expert mode on Super Monkey Ball and saved recordings of my best trick stage clears to the memory card. I got to the final boss in Luigi's Mansion. I had 6 more blue coins to find in Super Mario Sunshine. I built a terrible homemade wooden DDR platform. I bought a real copy of Super Metroid, even though I didn't have a Super Nintendo. Each night we watched anime which I had downloaded from DC++, laying on a futon mattress on their floor, going through dozens of series, unable to find any decent public tileset tools. Phil started working on a tileset graphics editor in Java, which he had learned at Michigan Tech. I told him I would make the whole game if he did that. I started working on the RPG engine. Within a few months he had a fully functional tile editor, with layers that matched the GBA hardware. Phil was hardcore. It was all inside one huge Java file he had written in Notepad. He was adding in network support and making it self-compiling, and I told him to take a break, and I would do the rest in 6 months. It took me a lot longer than 6 months. My dad was right. Phil's editor is still the basis of my game editing tools to this day. I offered to give him half of what Bob's game makes, but he refused, true to his champion nature. I'll probably try to give him half anyway if it makes a lot. Phil is a great friend. There was a blackout, and we had no power for several days. I played the just-released Japanese NES Classics Metroid ROM on my GBA SP with my girlfriend on their couch in the dark. It was one of the best times of my life. Our futon got black mold underneath it. An obese man moved in above us and the ceiling bent and creaked dangerously wherever he walked. After a few days without sleep, I went up and started yelling at him. He laughed. We went to the main office and demanded a different apartment. We should have moved to a less cheap complex. Maybe I should have gotten a job. It was too late. I was already on my journey, and holding on to my dream at all costs. They gave us a new apartment, a mirror image of our previous one in another building. We moved everything over. This one had a guy living next door who was trying to be the next Eminem. He watched us move in all our stuff, and glared at me every time I walked past. We should have been nicer to the apartment staff. Lack of sleep or not, it was 2004. I worked on graphics in Phil's Tile Editor and programmed their RPG engine during the day. We bought Pokémon Channel, got stoned, and cackled at Pikachu. My girlfriend played Harvest Moon on the GameCube. I played Dragon Warrior 4 on a GBA NES emulator on the flashcart on the toilet until my legs fell asleep and I stumbled off onto the floor. I bought a Beatmania IIDX controller and started practicing. We watched anime at night. I sent an email to John Carmack and he gave a short reply, making me certain I was the next video game superstar. If only I could make the game. I went to go play DDR with my friend a few weeks later, and had a sinking feeling the whole night. My girlfriend called us cell phone and told us someone had broken in and stolen the GameCube and my PC. We went to the nearest GameStop and they had my games on the shelf. We showed them the receipt with the GameCube serial number on it and they got the security tape with the neighbor selling their games. They found my PC in our neighbor's apartment, but the police confiscated it for evidence. I wish he had become the next Eminem. I hope he has recovered and I feel bad about it now. My memory card was already sold, and I never found the last 6 blue coins. To this day I never beat Luigi's Mansion. I will do these things as soon as I get a PC and some free time. My Super Monkey Ball replays. We forever lost. I went to court, but didn't get my PC back. Feeling victimized, I became paranoid and stored everything left at my parents' house. Becoming minimalistic and only using an old Dell laptop, I needed vindication. I wrote an NPC engine with dozens of unnecessary movement types, implementing every kind of NPC behavior I had seen in any other game. I wrote a formatted text engine and drew half a dozen fonts for it, pixel by pixel. My game started becoming my identity, and I started getting completely lost in it. I became obsessed. I couldn't work hard enough. I worked at nights, leaving my girlfriend to play Harvest Moon alone. I took the laptop outside and walked around until I found open Wi-Fi, and downloaded some porn for the first time in years. I kept drawing my childhood, trying to remember. Our lease ran out and we moved to a nicer but smaller apartment. I selfishly took the bedroom as my office. We got Comcast internet and I got re-addicted to internet porn. I listened to comedy albums all day and drew graphics while stoned. The Nintendo DS came out. I was terrified by it, realizing I was out of time. After reading news that GBA games would be ported to it, I felt a tinge of hope. I ordered the first pass-through flash device available for it. It was handmade and had number 7 written on it with a Sharpie. I began to port my GBA RPG engine to it after a few months, using the Palab library in place of Hamlab. I had the strangest feeling that Palab was somehow being developed to save my life, using my parents' money. I filed to trademark Button Mash, I read, Atlas Shrugged, on a homebrew text reader on my GBA SP, in bed next to my girlfriend, and then started sleeping alone on the floor of the office. Cave Story was released and I became furiously jealous that I wasn't the first one-man game. I forced myself to keep working even harder, drawing terrible graphics. Life became a blur. I was becoming completely mad. I saw the potential, even if nobody else did. and my defensiveness only made those around me more critical, making me more defensive. I started gaining weight, I lost my self-discipline and self-control and developed an ego instead. I stopped playing DDR, and instead smoked too much pot and too many cigarettes. I became paranoid and lost all my self-esteem. I became jealous, possessive, and reclusive. I started writing myself notes and tacking them on the walls, reminding me to be nice, to cheer up, to stay motivated. It only made it worse. Of course, it was 2005, my girlfriend and I constantly argued and I downloaded a massive porn collection. I became increasingly more insecure about my failure to produce the game which I had made my identity. I got a strange growth on my right index finger. My girlfriend bought me Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, and I played it once and never touched it again. I was spoiled, I was selfish, I was enslaved by my addictions. I was confused and I could not understand. I was on my way to hell. Phil wanted his desk back, and I argued with him and haughtily dropped it off at his house. I started avoiding my girlfriend completely, only coming out for my now hourly glass of coffee. She finally had enough and started staying out late with friends, then other guys, trying to get my attention. I tried to quit smoking. I was filled with rage. I started putting up notes on the wall telling myself to be nicer. Then as soon as I saw her I would be overcome with anger and march back into the room. Slamming the door, she giggled at me and threw a party with friends from her work. I threw a tantrum and knocked a monitor onto the floor. I moved out in a dramatic act, moving to Lansing into an old converted college dorm room for $250 a month. I sealed up the door with foam to keep out the noise and keep myself in. After stocking up on canned food and coffee, spending weeks at a time in the tiny dungeon I had created, I forced myself to keep clicking. After a month, my girlfriend emailed me, sighing it was over. I hadn't had the spine to officially break it off myself. The finality of it hit me and I went into despair. Depressed out of my mind and trying to stay motivated, I covered the walls completely with notes and quotes. I got stoned, drew graphics, watched anime, and sat in the tiny shower stall wall with an umbrella, pretending it was raining. I tried to bake bread in a toaster oven after watching Yakutate Japan, and almost set the place on fire. There was an infestation of beetles that came through the window. I masturbated to my huge porn collection until it hurt, and finally tossed the DVD spindles into a dumpster in an attempt to kick it for good. I played pretend DDR on the floor without a pad, and began to subject myself to an unrealistic workout schedule. My cheeks became gaunt and pale. I listened to comedy and weird synth pop and tried to quit smoking again, packing tobacco into a weed pipe. Once the loneliness had overcome my willpower, I was in that room for 6 months. And then my parents cut me off. I had created a massive world. It was ugly, but it was real. It was 2006. With nowhere to go, I moved into my friend's rented house basement with asbestos insulation everywhere, setting up a plastic tent in the midst of my despair. It was freezing. I took the bus and donated blood plasma for money, coming back and playing DDR until I passed out. I felt my consciousness and self-control coming back. I kept refining the graphics. I hacked on Phil's editor, adding features, trying to make it my own. It was a college town. As soon as I got some momentum, there was another girl that appeared. Somehow I think it was at Denny's. I rebounded on her immediately. I tried to quit smoking again, and failed. Later I would find out that she was cheating on her fiancé. I might as well have been kicking myself in the balls. It wasn't really her fault. He had gotten selfish and she needed somebody to fill the void. She didn't really care about me. We had sex in the plastic tent in the basement. I was broken and confused. My dad picked me up in his truck at some point. All I remember is him yelling at me to get normal. He was trying to knock some sense into me, to get me to understand I didn't need to do it this way. I didn't understand. My game was all that mattered, and I didn't have time to change my methods. Over the next few days, I obsessively searched for apartments online. I found the cheapest place I could. An hour away from my parents' house in an urban sprawl town, a half-hour away, I was in some kind of terrifying autopilot. I somehow sat my parents down and convinced them to pay for one more year, that this was my career, that it would all be worth it. I moved in with my beat-up desk and a cobbled-together PC. It was a 1.2 GHz Duron with 256 MB RAM. This is what I wrote most of my game on. The power supply didn't fit in the case, so I duct taped it inside the desk. My parents bought me a used love seat, probably hoping that I would get a new girlfriend. I set my desk up in the bedroom and set up a DDR station in the main room. At first honoring my parents' request that I keep my apartment looking normal, I soon tacked all my notes and motivational quotes I had collected along the way onto the wall and covered the window with black plastic. Labeling the door with Motivation Room, I put a mirror in front of my computer so that I had someone to talk to, commanding myself to be the hero. I had no phone, no car, I still didn't have a driver's license, no internet, no money, and nobody that I knew. Within a half hour, I was completely isolated. It took a few weeks to adjust, unable to focus and still heartbroken. I walked around searching for free Wi-Fi on my DS, and sent emails to the girl from Lansing. She never replied. I walked 2 miles to get my groceries. I chain-smoked tobacco in filter tubes. I walked to the library with a USB stick to check my email and get new versions of Palab. I smoked small bits of weed out of a tiny bowl one had made from parts from Ace Hardware. Once I adjusted, I got back to clicking. It was a fresh start. So I made a new logo and decided to rename the company to Densetsu Soft. I really didn't like their name of the game anymore, and the Bob's game concept had begun to form in my mind. I got on food stamps and started making one giant pot of food substance. A lot of frozen vegetables, spaghetti sauce, noodles, and chicken or tuna. I ate the same thing every day, scooping out a bowl of the awful-tasting mixture and microwaving it. Eventually I started eating it cold out of the pot straight from the fridge. I went down to 130 pounds. I spent a couple of months drawing the massive outside areas for 16 hours a day, and another few months cleaning up and adding layers of detail to the existing graphics. It still wasn't good enough. I moved my desk into the middle of the larger main room and covered the sliding glass door with black plastic, to keep myself inside and focused. I screwed some boards in across the door to make it annoying to open, covered it in black plastic, and piled up everything I wasn't using against it. I stayed inside for sometimes over a month or two. The first 4 days were always really tough and I found myself inventing excuses to leave. But after that I was on autopilot and I had the time of my life. I got my self-discipline back. I read through an offline Wikipedia copy I had and tried to learn how to become a noble and good person. My heart was open and I knew the work I was doing was good. I got good at Beatmania, IIDX. I got pretty good at C and Java, switching between the RPG engine and the heavily modified editor. I got good at graphics. I got good at making track music. I played through newly released DS-ROMs each night laying in the mattress next to my desk. Learning from the designs, I filled notebooks with ideas, scribbles, rants, and drawings, some of it brilliant, some of it neurotic. I wrote entries each day in a massive journal. I was still fighting against my addictions, but I was starting to win. It was lonely, and the porn I had became like gold. I deleted it all, and then undeleted what I could the next day. I flushed packs of cigarettes and wrote notes on the door declaring I would never touch them again. Cracking within hours and running to the tobacco store. Thanksgiving came, and I went back to my parents' house. It was boring, so I met up with some friends at Denny's, along with a girl from high school I chatted with on AOL Instant Messenger who lived down their street. I showed her my game running on the DS, proud of what I had made. For some reason, I wanted to prove that I wasn't the dropout loser she took me for. But I have no idea why I thought that. My parents brought me a new pair of shoes for Christmas. It was 2007. I worked through the new year, going to bed early after playing some Dragon Quest Monsters. Joker. The stress I was going through, along with the weed, lack of self-esteem, and extreme isolation, made me psychotic. I screamed at the walls and paced back and forth between the desk and the bathroom mirror. I listened to the same song on a loop for weeks or months, sometimes even while sleeping. I covered the mirror with Insane Expo marker rantings and then covered it in black plastic. Not seeing my reflection for weeks, I experimented with all the variables, and removed everything but the goal. I got a postcard in the mail from the girl in high school who I had hung out with on Thanksgiving. She had gone on a road trip with a friend. She must have asked for my address at some point. There was something strange about the postcard, and after staring at it and wondering, I left it on the floor next to my laptop until it got shuffled into the piles of random clutter. It was dangerous, and it was hell, but it was working. That's all that mattered. My favorite motivational quote: a bad game is bad forever, a delayed game is eventually good. Shigeru Miyamoto was taped up in the corner, giving me hope. My productivity increased every day until I was a machine. It began to happen the way I had imagined. It was working, and though it was a constant torture, I had never felt more satisfied. I went through the list of characters I had come up with, drawing 8 full sprite sheets every day, and then going over them all again. I drew hundreds of sprites without stopping. I went through each room methodically and scripted the NPC placement and behaviors, hard-coding it all in C. The engine was shaping up into a solid, professional piece of work. It still had some bugs, but it was stable enough to walk around the whole world and run all the NPC behavior overnight without crashing. My game was real. I had written nearly an entire retail-quality RPG by myself. I was 23 years old. It was the happiest I had ever been in my life. I felt satisfied that I was becoming the person I wanted to be. It felt as if I was getting somewhere. I was going to make it. I was a guy like Leonardo da Vinci. I felt powerful, as if I had been reaching for something and nearly gained it. Something within me knew that I would have the leverage I needed to do anything, to change the world the way I needed to. My dad came to visit, and asked me if I could invent a way to improve Detroit. I came up with an idea for a school desk with a touch screen in it, with automated interactive lessons and a worldwide educational tournament network. I was sure that I was going to be the one to revolutionize education. Over the next 2 weeks, there was an odd phenomenon. By some strange coincidence, my few remaining friends spontaneously came over to visit, and I showed them what I had made. One by one they mocked it, got angry, and stopped coming over. I didn't understand. Wasn't it good? Why would they get angry? I boarded the door back up and angrily wrote notes on it, sighing, "Fuck these people. I don't need them." It was me versus the world. My parents came over and I showed them what I had made. They were amazed and impressed for a day. I was so proud, and more motivated than ever. Then things got strange. They started pointing out the tiniest flaws in what I had made. I couldn't understand why, but it hurt. I would obsess over their words for days. I mentioned it to them several times, and they offered no explanation. Why couldn't they just be proud of me? I didn't understand and that the problem was in myself, not them. My mom got a bit weird and kept insisting that I get a cell phone. I tried explaining my situation to her, that I couldn't afford any compromise, that it was too difficult for me to resist the temptation. I would call a girl. She kept pushing and sort of forced it on me. I broke it, and then lied and told her I had dropped it. She immediately got me a new one. I broke all the numbers off the cell phone, and then stabbed the board underneath with a screwdriver until there was no way I could dial with it. I found a way anyhow. I called the girl from high school in total compulsion, as if possessed. I think I asked her how her trip was, and then hung up. When I was in kindergarten, I drew a picture in crayon which was made into a dinner plate. My parents always served me food on it, even as a young adult. They would always ask me what it meant, and I never knew. It appears to be me in a room painting and listening to music, sweating bullets at a knock on the door which has come to interrupt me. The door is in my heart. There was a knock on the door. I was taking a shower, and there is no way I could have heard it, but I felt it, somehow. I opened the door wearing a towel, expecting nobody to be there. The girl was standing there, wearing a nice outfit and fresh makeup. She informed me that she was house-sitting for her sister with the whole place to herself, and invited me to come hang out. Things got weird. I sat on her sister's couch and said, "I'm not going to sleep with you." She got neurotic, snapped, "I've had enough of you," and drove me back, slamming the car door on me. No problem. I was tough, and had closed all my weaknesses. I finally had control over myself, and I could handle this. I decided to try and quit smoking again. It was probably the biggest mistake of my life so far. I failed, and my will shattered. I was walking down the street, and the next thing I knew I was on the phone, humiliating myself, crying, apologizing. She made fun of me and hung up. I couldn't redeem myself. I was broken. I couldn't think. I couldn't focus. My heart was shattered. I suddenly felt like I was wearing a 1,000-pound weight. I had climbed out of the well of despair and become my own master, and somehow, like a thief, she had seen that light and was overcome with the compulsion to grab it. She had stolen my heart the very moment I had freed it. I had been tearing through my to-do list at lightning speed. My changelog had been racking up pages each day. I had been a machine. Suddenly, I was completely useless. I tried to focus, and got immediately frustrated, knocking my monitor off the desk in rage. I couldn't comprehend it. I went to the store with my dad the next day. I told him what had happened, and that I didn't understand. He said, "You'll figure it out." It sounded sinister and sly when he said it. I was confused and I couldn't understand. I didn't know how to cope. I had no control and I was grabbing onto anything I could. I remembered in the 6th grade they had recommended Ritalin. I had refused to take it. My mom had begged, but didn't force me. First I went on Wellbutrin, trying to quit smoking. Then, remembering that first night with the Metroid, I tried Concerta again, then Adderall, then generic Ritalin. My dad only said, "I guess if you need it," in a mysterious tone. I damaged my health and my heart. I was sure that my dreams were ruined. But I was so close and there was no way I could give up. In my mind, I couldn't understand why someone would do this to me. I was the youngest person to have written something like I had. It was all I had. It was the largest thing I had ever seen written by one person. My dreams were right there in front of me, and was watching them fall to pieces. I had done it. I had struggled through hell and back and lived through a complete nightmare and sacrificed everything. Why would they hurt me? Why were people around me attacking me and not supporting me? I didn't understand. I had been defeated, but not fairly. I was defeated by a dirty trick, not honest work, which was intensely more frustrating. How could I respect such an approach? It was my own fault, my own weakness, but I didn't know how to overcome it. I couldn't do it. Instead, I got worse. I wasted months in the department. I walked in circles. I screamed. I broke everything. I couldn't focus. My heart was closed and nothing would come out. I was frustrated to shreds. I got obsessed with myself, trying to find myself again. I started recording everything. I took pictures. I documented everything. I got increasingly weird, imagining myself standing up for homeless people. I screamed at the store manager when I saw him berate an employee. I walked outside in the snow for miles without a coat, amped up on Adderall. Not feeling the cold, I still forced myself to draw graphics, even at a slow, frustrated pace. I developed an ego and drew a forest with my signature in it. I made some weird music in Reason and emailed it to a radio station, and then lashed out at them when they said it wasn't good enough. I sent weird, embarrassing emails to friends. I spammed that girl with hundreds of humiliating emails, even proposing marriage. She never once replied. She knew I was lying, even if I didn't. I called her house and her mom answered with a sigh. She put a daughter on, who mocked me and hung up. She moved out of state shortly after. Her only online presence was an Amazon wish list full of shoes and diamonds. Somehow, seeing it put me into a haze of fear, like a curtain had been closed over my consciousness. It was mind control, the uncomfortable truth about humans. We control each other's minds. We're psychic beings. I didn't know that then, and it took me years to understand. By now, I've realized that I hadn't been any better, that I was just passing blame. I had showed her my game, not knowing the meaning of the act. I needed to learn to respect women. I had to kick the addictions and master my own will. But I didn't know that they had bound my mind. I wasn't capable of understanding. Eventually, I figured it out, just like my dad had said. Thanks, Dad. I had slept with her friend back when I first got my apartment. I had forgotten. She had crushed me because I had hacked into her heart and mind by showing her my game, and did everything she could to prevent me from reaching any kind of redemption to save her own soul. Why? Because I didn't respect women, so she didn't respect me, and had done what she needed to get out from under my control. She had the natural advantage of power, because she had beauty and I was full of lust to her. My tactics must have seemed just as unfair and dirty, since I smoked cigarettes instead of proper coping methods. No matter what I achieved, in her mind it wasn't respectable. I borrowed a bike that was on the lawn next door to get groceries. The neighbor was waiting for me when I got back, seemingly high on cocaine. He punched me in the head when I dropped the bike back off. To be fair, it was his kid's bike, and I hadn't asked. I ran away as fast as I could, and came back to my apartment, terrified. I packed all my stuff into boxes, and then unpacked it again. I felt more defeated than ever before. My parents cut me off again the next month, refusing to renew my lease, which was already past a year and on month to month. My dad took me to a restaurant, and after the meal handed me a card to a psychiatrist, sighing that I had no choice. I stood my ground, but I was quickly running out of options. They were closing the trap on me and I knew it. I had to move back to my parents' house for their first time since I was 17. My parents bought me and my brother a Wii for Christmas. I played Super Mario Galaxy, standing up in the living room, playing on the family TV. It was 2008. My dad bought me a new computer, desk, and chair, probably trying to cheer me up. It was a dual-core AMD machine with an integrated Radeon. It wasn't top of the line, but it was the best computer I had ever had by far. Unfortunately, I was completely useless. I stayed for a few weeks in my old bedroom with no self-control, staving off the fear by popping Ritalin, masturbating to porn, reading 4chan, and trying desperately to make money through online scam sites, clicking on banner ads and signing up for spam email lists for $5 prepaid debit cards. I played Metroid Prime 3 on a CRT monitor on my desk, barely comprehending what I was doing through my stimulant haze. Nothing was enjoyable. I had to get out of there, despite definitely not being ready. I emailed Nintendo in desperation, being as assertive as I could, somehow, with great persistence. I made my way to a business guy there. I needed help. I needed someone to take me seriously, because I couldn't with a broken heart and broken will, out of options and coked up on Ritalin. I kept emailing. After a week or two of back-and-forth emails, things seemed to be getting nowhere. Frustrated, I lashed out at the business guy and sent him a psychotic mess of an email, trying to stave off the massive depression and feeling of being crushed. I apologized, and miraculously, the business guy agreed to meet me anyway after I showed him my game running on the DS through a video conference. My mom had to take me to a local library to use their video conference setup. After that, he said he would look at my game at the upcoming GDC. He probably just wanted to make sure I wasn't dangerous first. Honestly, all I wanted was the development kit, so I could keep programming. Deep down inside, I could sense there was a way I could scratch my way out of the hole I had been shoved in. I needed that SDK as a sort of leverage, so I had some kind of official approval, some kind of endorsement to show the people around me to shut him up, to keep him from trying to discourage me. In retrospect, it might not have helped that much. It may have even made them fight against me harder. The truth about humans is that we are all in a giant psychic dogpile, scrambling to tear each other down and claim the throne. The meaning of insecurity is that it is an opening in the door inside our heart. To be a truly great leader, one must earn the respect and love of others, not just conquer them. I went to GDC. I had never cared about conferences and had no interest in it. It was my first plane trip by myself, and my first time away from Michigan. I was a total noob there. I saw the Fez guy standing at his booth. I said something like, "That looks neat. It's like Cave Story with a 3D mechanic." It was supposed to be a compliment, but he seemed to take offense to it. It did look like Cave Story, and I'm glad he finished it. I stayed in the Vagabond Inn in a cheap part of San Francisco. I saw the police raid a house while walking to find my hotel, and when I arrived there were two male dwarfs in BDSM gear staying across the hall from me, which was a big culture shock. I ordered some Chinese food to my hotel room, and it was the best I had ever had. I ate about a quarter of it and crammed the rest in the miniature fridge. The Nintendo guy delayed my meeting until the very last time slot of the very last day. I showed up to the meeting with my luggage, because my plane was leaving right after. They were starting to close down the exhibits. There were 3 people in a white booth, the business guy and 2 Japanese developers in expensive-looking shiny suits. 1 woman and 1 man. He asked me if I enjoyed seeing GDC. I told him that I mostly was in my hotel room working on the demo. I had spent most of the week just cutting out all the cutscenes and anything that looked buggy, leaving a very sparse and bare-bones world. It would be the last time I would touch the code for nearly a year. I had taken too much Ritalin, and I was extremely nervous. I stammered through all my sentences. My demo was terrible. The Japanese woman walked around in the demo a bit while the business guy asked me questions about the game. My answers were vague and confused. The Japanese woman laughed at getting hit by a car, which made me feel great. And then the demo crashed at a dinner table scene that wasn't finished. He asked me if I would be willing to work with my own team within Nintendo. Without even considering it, I immediately said no. He looked angry at this. I immediately felt half stupid and half impressed with myself. After a few more questions, I remember him saying, "Sadly, I don't think your game will ever be released." I got really angry at that, and it stuck with me for a long time. I used it in my later, Stage 80, demo. I suppose the reason I got so angry is both because I was insecure about my unfinished game and because I believed that game development should be done by a shut-in lunatic man-child. Isn't that what an artist is? In retrospect, I am pretty sure I was just way too sensitive. I am sure I looked insane, but I'm not sure if he was testing my resolve, just being a jerk, or it was his honest assessment of the Luna Kid with a buggy demo. It doesn't matter. I kept asking about the SDK and saying that's all I wanted, that I just wanted to keep developing. He said he would do what he could, but he didn't sound confident about it. I knew deep down that it was never going to happen. The meeting was completely useless. I wasn't even close to capable of handling it and I had no confidence. After 5 minutes it was over, and I turned around while walking out and yelled, "I want that SDK." He looked impressed with that for a split second, and once again I felt immediately half stupid and half proud of myself. I walked out and across their expo floor. The conference was over, and they were taking the booths down. I then turned around and walked back to the Nintendo booth, found the guy, and asked him one last question. "Can I do another pitch?" He hesitated for a moment, and then said I could. This would become very important later on. I flew home and immediately told my parents that Nintendo had offered me my own development team. It was enough to escape. My friend and I got an office a few streets away from my parents' house. I set up my computer and listened to very angry industrial music there. He played the drums in the next room. I slept there at night, only going back to my parents to take a shower every few days. My ID had expired, so I went to go renew it at the DMV. They handed me a driver's license instead of an ID. I didn't know how to drive. My mom got a new car and gave me her 2000 Chrysler Sebring convertible, and I sort of figured it out by driving around at night. After a month or two, I came back to my parents' house and they stopped me in the living room. They handed me a check from a Tennessee bank in a city I recognized from childhood trips. I had apparently inherited $100,000 from my great-aunt who had passed away. I was a trust fund baby and had never known it. My parents looked sad giving it to me, and I somehow knew it was going to ruin my life. I tried to give it back to my dad. I said I didn't want it. He took me to Charles Schwab and had his friend there deposit it into a managed account. It was the first time in my life I had more than a couple $100. Suddenly, I had the resources to make my game happen and everything was in place. But I still had a broken heart. I couldn't think. I couldn't focus. I was chomping Ritalin and chain smoking, trying to pick myself back up, unaware that I was only keeping myself held down. In my mind, that horrible girl had ruined my dreams and there was nothing I could do. It was my fault. Of course, I know that now. I wasn't strong enough. I had no self-control. I didn't have the willpower and I didn't know how to get back up. I went to dinner with my friend's family, and his father told me to put a video of my game online. I told him I was going to splice in footage of how hard I tried, of the scratchings on the walls. He told me it wasn't necessary. I came back and made a terrible bare-bones website talking about how I had locked myself in a room and put 15,000 hours into this game. which was more or less the truth. It was the first time I had ever touched HTML. I put a video of my game online with a hastily cut together video and added captions to it on YouTube, with my friend playing drums in the next room over of the office. A few major gaming websites picked it up, and things started looking up. My friend bought the iPhone 3G. It was interesting but still too slow and frustrating. At the request of my fans, I reluctantly made a gameplay video showing some of the first quests in my game. It wasn't worth it, as I thought. I did some interviews for small websites. I didn't know how to deal with the journalist requests and try to please everyone. I started emailing with a small publisher for the DS. I signed their NDA. They told me to apply for Nintendo licensing, and the guys would rewrite the game for me to make it marketable. It was the most depressing email exchange I had ever had in my life. The App Store was released for the iPhone. My friend brought some of his college buddies to the office. We ate psilocybin mushrooms and LSD a few times, and one time both at once. Suddenly, I remembered and fully understood what I was making. It woke me back up and opened my heart, gaining my memories and thoughts back, if only temporarily. I didn't yet understand what had happened, but it had worked. I made some weird videos, putting in everything I wanted. I put in a time-elapsed segment of me being shirtless and masturbating in one frame. From the time in the apartment I had gotten obsessed with recording myself. I put an elaborate stop-motion segment of the creation of my sprites, put together manually from backups. It took me a month of solid work. It was art. Half of the YouTube comments were, "Why is there a shirtless guy?" I didn't care. I was starting to become functional again. Ritalin and cigarettes or not, I bought her kitten, a Persian Munchkin girl, which I named Midi. I had become interested in watching the stock market, and noticed that it had inclined to a peak for a long time and had started to decline. Trusting my gut, I emailed the financial guy at Schwab and sent him screenshots. Sighing, "I think the stock market is going to crash." He assured me that wasn't possible. A week or two later, the stock market crashed and I lost a big chunk of the money I had just inherited. I bought the first Android phone, the G1. It was awful and unusable, but I knew it was definitely the future, with the excuse of moving near the publisher available to me. But of course I just wanted to get the heck out of Michigan. I moved to New Jersey with my friend, telling my mom it was only temporary. It was really hard to get away. We packed a U-Haul trailer and set off, my friend towing the trailer in the rain behind his SUV, me following in my mom's Chrysler Sebring convertible. I still barely knew how to drive, having had access to a car for only a month or two. Once we arrived, we somehow managed to find a duplex that would approve us. I took the upstairs bedroom, my friend took the downstairs. I covered the walls of the room with black plastic. We got internet access. I had the funds that I needed. I had a commercial office back in Michigan, a registered company, a tax ID, and I had a place to live right near the publisher I was talking to. All I needed was the license from Nintendo to get a copy of the SDK and get back to programming. I waited for the response on the application. I emailed back and forth with the licensing Wahida, who said it was definitely a unique case. They stopped responding. A couple of weeks passed. It was past the deadline. I was frantic. I couldn't handle the stress. I was confused, angry, and frustrated. I was so close to getting myself back. I wrote a genuine, desperate plea on my website. I deleted it. I put it back. An idea was forming in my mind. I wanted to stand up for myself, somehow. If Super Mario Bros. Had taught me anything when I was 4 years old, it was that I needed to eat a power-up to smash through the ceiling. We drank psilocybin tea made with 10 grams of cubensis mushrooms. Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails had recently done his Year Zero ARG, where he had a fake SWAT team raid a concert venue and arrest the concert-goers. A sort of pseudo-meta protest with an obviously real-world meaning. I could do something just as creative using only a website and courage. Nobody in the video game industry had ever done such a unique thing. All publicity is good publicity, and I knew this was going to get some attention. We went to Target and bought a crappy wireless IP cam and a rotating disco ball. I had been given permission by the business guy to give Nintendo one more pitch. I was going to become the 9 Inch Nails of video games. It was going to be the coolest thing anyone had ever done in video game history. On top of what I had already done, the largest game ever made by a single person. Having gone through hell and back, it would make me a legend. My friend played the drums, and I chanted a speech straight out of my heart. I was going to change the world. The next generation of children would all be super smart, thanks to the internet. And I would guide them. I would seize the leverage I needed to revolutionize the education system. I was going to reset society. But first, I was going to play the villain. I was going to become Bob. I laid in bed and realized that God is the voice in my head, that we're all an extension of the same being, and that all truth comes from the heart. I learned that we're in the Matrix. We are beings made of voxels, made of pure energy in a divine simulation which we cannot possibly comprehend. I learned that the force that keeps everyone from reaching their own potential is their ego, insecurity, and acts motivated by jealousy in others. Everyone is capable of becoming godlike if you decide to become what you are. If you don't let the hurtful words of the jealous stop you. Agents can take over anyone at any time. I realized that I am a guy like Jesus. We all are capable of it. It was Year Zero. I realized that I am God and I am playing my own game. Something was missing. I express ordered and led signboard. It was 2009. It was a confused, messy protest. It was ridiculous and awesome, and I knew it. I just typed random nonsense into a plastic box and cackled like a maniac. I emailed the business guy at Nintendo and told him that I was making my pitch. As promised, I was doing something big, something important and original. And I was going to do it my way, on my own terms. Better to ask for forgiveness later than permission. It began with the concept that I was trapped in a green room. This had something to do with being trapped in my own insecurity. Something to do with the Viridian Room web game that had been popular recently, and mainly had to do with going along with the theme of being locked in a room, since that's what I had been doing for most of the previous 5 years unfortunately. While the people who were already following my game realized that most new people coming in didn't get the associations, it did get the attention that I wanted, though. I wasn't sure whether to call it a viral ad, or a meta protest, or even a real protest. But it was certainly all of the above and somewhere in between, and I definitely did it to get attention for the game. I had already assumed I was turned down for the license and that it was a lost cause. I should not have been so hasty. It was still technically possible they were debating it. I just lost hope and decided to move on, turning the rejection into publicity. It worked. The internet was infuriated. There were threads in every gaming forum that had erupted with frantic arguments between people who got it, and people who were obviously frustrated to tears by it. Someone is doing something without reservation, without regard for the social norm or political rules. It's cheating. I emailed a few hilariously insane letters to the contacts I had at Nintendo, telling them if they didn't make an open app store they were doomed to become like Sega within a few years. I didn't get in any replies, but I didn't care. I knew I was right. I got some out-of-office replies, cackled like a maniac, and added them to the email chain. I was tripping my balls off and didn't care in the slightest, as I was able to see that power is all in the imagination. I announced that I was the greatest game developer that had ever lived. I was, of course, half serious and half joking, or perhaps completely serious and completely joking, and ran in the next room choking with laughter, telling my friend what I had just typed. "That is probably the most inflammatory statement ever made," he said, while playing with Final Cut Pro and Ableton Live on his Mac. An Encyclopedia Dramatica page was quickly created by someone who would probably never again feel a shred of freedom to be themselves, although annoyed by it at first. Once I understood the circumstances that compel people to antagonize others, I felt sorry for them. Once you submit to peer pressure, you become enslaved by it. It turned out to be a German guy who had written a Virtual Boy emulator. I understood at once that he was a great fan who was simply uncomfortable with showing it. And to be honest, the page was pretty good and took quite a bit of effort to make. Some possessed individual, likely a jealous aspiring game developer, put together a slanted Wikipedia article, shaping my words to paint the story the way they wanted to perceive it. I couldn't believe someone would put so much effort into caring about someone else. But I appreciated the fact that I had a Wikipedia article now. My friend had driven back to Michigan for a few days. We had brainstormed a big list of concepts, and it was time for a big one. I decided I was going to trash the room and fake my own death, transitioning into a Batman-esque supervillain. I froze the camera and very carefully overturned all my furniture. As a finishing flourish, I took a stack of blank printer paper and tossed it in the air. I laid on the ground to get a few good camera frames of myself looking good and dead and called my mom. "Hi, Mom. I'm not dead, don't worry. If anyone asks where I am, don't tell them. Okay." I put the feed on a loop of the frames of me laying on the floor and went to sleep. A worried kid in Europe called the police. They read the website, didn't know what to make of it, and went to my parents' house asking where they could find me. My mom gave me up in about 2 seconds, of course, and they contacted the local police in New Jersey, who came and kicked in my door. They were just following protocol. They woke me up from sleeping happily in my futon behind their camera and asked if I was all right. I sat up in bed and immediately said, "Oh, darn it. I knew this would happen." I showed them my spiked shoulder pads and tried to explain that I was doing a comic book transition from a mild-mannered hero into an egomaniacal video game villain. They said that when a threat of self-harm is reported, they are obligated to either take me in for a quick voluntary evaluation or they had to arrest me. They asked me to put a caption at the top of my website saying I was okay, and I agreed. I complained that it was breaking the flow. To no avail. I had weed sitting out on the table and I think they pretended not to notice. At some point I quickly laid a piece of paper over it while I was showing the officers that none of my stuff was broken and all the papers were completely blank. One officer went in the other room, where there was a bag of mushrooms sitting inside one of those cube storage seats with a cushion. Comes off. There was a table with some candles and a small battery-operated rock fountain. The room was otherwise empty. I realized he had gone in there and grabbed my coat. Rushing in, I swung my coat around to catch his attention, put it on, and said, "I'm ready. Let's go." I have no idea if he had looked in the compartment, but I wasn't going to give him any more time, leaving the door broken and hanging open. The officers took me to the nearest psychiatric ward. I explained the situation to the staff there, and they went to my website and laughed. They sat me in a waiting room with a girl who kept screaming and banging on the glass. until a lady with a clipboard came in and asked me a few questions. Did I have a girlfriend? No. Did I have anything to look forward to? I wrote a huge video game which is currently getting a huge amount of attention due to an online campaign where I faked my own death and got escorted to a psych ward. Then she brought me into their staff section and asked for my autograph. Shortly after, I was certified officially sane by the state of New Jersey, given a document to prove it, and was free to go. My friend was on the way back, and he came and picked me up. The apartment staff fixed the door, and I continued, a bit annoyed but more or less okay. I continued updating the site with nonsense, fueled by the artificial focus of Ritalin, slightly stoned, and smoking cigarettes. I wore a bathrobe with some cardboard spikes tapes onto them. I kept a laptop in the bathroom with some JAV porn on it, and for some reason started to feel a little guilty about the Japanese ladies on screen. I regularly turned off the light and went out with my friend to the store, and a couple times we ventured into a local strip club. I felt a bit guilty about not sticking to the lock-in 100%, but it wasn't supposed to be that serious to begin with. I am trapped in my own subconscious room of envy, trying to aspire to tear down my idols and become my own god. They broke into my house. They installed keyloggers. They are the Yakuza. I was half serious and reaching for deep metaphor, and half just being plain outrageous. It was supposed to be referring to trolls breaking into my psyche and using my words against me. I am pretty sure Nintendo is an old Yakuza company, though I am also quite sure that they have cut those ties the best they could. I'm still not sure about how Gunpei Yoko died though. The biggest problem with half the stuff I typed is that it was way too deep for anyone to understand. Even myself. My forum quickly filled up with 15-year-old geniuses and prodigies, the only people on the internet who understood what the heck I was doing. I ordered some posters and business cards. They arrived after a week. I had gotten 4 huge boxes of business cards just to be safe. It was way more than I had thought. I got stoned and talked with my friend about how hilarious it would be to go and put posters all over the Nintendo World Store and put my game on the shelf there, and with a whole bunch of hot Japanese babes, like at E3, sort of a way of pissing on their territory, I suppose. Of course, I was serious about wanting to, but there was no way I would actually do it. I went to sleep. He woke me up, letting me know that he had booked a bunch of Asian models from Craigslist. He had initially asked for Japanese models, but not enough had replied. I wasn't sure if this would be offensive or not, but it was too late. I was not prepared for this whatsoever, and to be honest, I hadn't been completely serious about going through with it. But I didn't have the heart to turn it down. We went and got some spiked boots from a gothic clothing store. We stopped in the Nintendo World Store to case the place out. I talked with one of the guys there about the Golf War Game Boy, and he told me if you thought about it, it is pretty obvious they replaced the screen. I thought about it, and he was right. I bought a Princess Peach coffee mug. We met with the Craigslist Asian models at a coffee shop across the street. They had absolutely no idea what we were doing, nor did we. I had been up for about 20 hours at that point and was in no condition or prepared for a public event. We went in about 10 a.m. when the store was completely empty. We taped some posters to the outside of the store, and then removed them, leaving 1 or 2. I put a few copies of my game box on the shelf. I slipped some business cards in the game racks and under some t-shirts. The manager came out with his wallet chain swinging and told us to leave. I told him that we had permission and slipped him the Nintendo executive's card from the GDC meeting to buy us some time. He immediately got on the phone, but it was 7 a.m. in California. After we were done, I turned around and yelled, "Welcome to Bob's Game," into the empty store while a guy standing on a ladder putting up a banner just stared at me blankly. We left. Back at home, I recorded dumping a couple of boxes of business cards out on the hardwood floor next to my boots, and taped a poster to the wall and signed it. I spliced in some police sirens to the video. It really needed music, and I knew it. It just wasn't exciting enough. I shipped it anyway. This was one of my biggest mistakes. I should have trusted my gut. It needed music. The internet hated the video and it just got smeared instantly as jaded developer vandalizes store by the gaming tabloids. I was pretty upset by this, because I felt that I had been framed in a way. Unfortunately, even after I provided proof of the hack, nobody bothered to retract it either. So much for professional games journalism. Nintendo finally emailed me the rejection letter. I suppose that they had taken the protests seriously enough to where me leaving the room was their leverage they needed. It was nice to have a real answer. And the protest was at least a success in that I actually forced a response out of them. It was obvious to me, at the time, that they would never have approved a one-man developer even though that may have been my own haste and pessimism. And perhaps I should have taken myself more seriously. I threw a party with the disco ball in response to the rejection letter. Finally, having gotten some closure at the very least, the Stage 80 video was fun to make, but was not factually accurate. I believe I captured the spirit of an independent developer and the emotions I had felt. But the guy on the other side of the table was a young executive, not a balding businessman. A few of the phrases were, however, verbatim as I remembered them. I made one last serious video, attempting to document my goals and explain the whole thing one last time to the best extent I could. It got reported nowhere and got very few views. It was a masterpiece. I talked about the sorcerer Iwata controlling the audience with his magic puppet strings. I thought I was joking. I didn't know where the knowledge came from. I didn't know that I had actually discovered their real truth. More on this later.